Well, hello out there, and welcome to another episode of the Saturday Night Synthesis. That song was crazy. That song really is crazy. It blows my mind, and I've had it in my head for the better part of 3 days. So I'd love to hear it again. I'm your host, Alex, as always, coming at you from Baltimore, Maryland. It's a great show. It's going to be hard to top that, but we have someone who's brave enough to try. We have a special musical guest, Robby. How are you doing? How does this Saturday night find you?
Hey, everything's going great. Life is so sweet. I can taste it. I'm really excited to be here. And I'm coming to you live, as you can see, from Los Angeles, California.
Well, that's exciting. Yeah, well, anyway, we're going to hear a little more from Robby later. He's got a set for us. He's going to play live. We're going to have a chat, too. So look forward to that. And if after the Tonight Show, you determine that you're incapable of having enough Robby in your life, that is do not consult a doctor. It's a common condition, and the only treatment for that condition is going and looking at his videos on the internet, other places, Earth Modular Society YouTube channel. We're going to have links to all that in the comments of the episode. If you have any questions about what you're seeing, or if you have a really good recipe for banana bread, leave them in the comments of this episode too. We're going to check them out. I will make the banana bread. Also, while you're there, like and subscribe. It'll just be fun. I promise it'll be fun. And if it wasn't fun, you can't come and get me, although you do know what city I live in. So I don't know. Anyway, we have a really great audience here tonight on Zoom. If anyone out there has any questions or comments when the show's going on, you can type them in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that. I'll ask them, and at the end of each segment of the show, we'll have a Q&A portion where you guys can unmute your mics and let it rip. And after all of that ado, I'm going to give you the man, the myth, the legend. It is my pleasure. Frederick Foxtrott, founder of The Feast, in semi-permanent exile in Long Island, New York. Frederick, how you doing? How's it going?
See that sign right there? That's Vandervoort Place. I put that up there for this past Thursday. I had a show for the New York Modular Society showcase, and I decided to break out this sign in support of my New York, Brooklyn history. So was amazing. I had such an amazing time. I actually featured the song I played tonight. I feel like it's such a cheat because I repeated the song, but I just had to because I think I'm going to sit with this patch for a little while and try to develop it and maybe record it for more of a produced assembled track. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that you were fresh off of your triumphant performance at the New York Modular Society May Showcase. Which is an amazing show. And if you guys out there like what you heard, go to the New York Modular Society YouTube page and check out all the performances. My mind was blown. I went in there thinking it was going to be great, and it exceeded my expectations.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It was like I played with some of the most amazing players I've ever heard. It was a little unfair for me to play last. I'll say that for sure. But you know what? It didn't even matter because the crowd was so great and the people in the chat were amazing. I feel like I had a good time and I liked what I played. So
yeah, well, I want to hear, having heard it a couple times now and liked it more each time. Can you tell us a little bit about what are you doing there in that patch?
I've said this a bunch of times, but I'm a maximalist, and it's just I don't know what it is about. I don't know if it's the way I listen to melodies or the way I write melodies. I like to cram as many melodies going on at the same time. And hopefully they're not necessarily stepping over each other, but in some ways bouncing off each other or harmonizing or doing something. I don't have a kind of technical reason why I like it, but this was a song where it was like 36 minutes and had way more layers. And I had to kind of claw it back as much as I could. There was, always a bunch of different layers going on with the Mother 32 providing all those bass lines are with the Mother 32. I have some kind of bass drones kind of things that happen with the Little Fatty stage 2 on the cubes. But all the kind of bouncing lower notes are coming over here with the Mother 32. And then I was really excited. A lot of people will probably heard that filter, a really amazing kind of squelch sound that I had with one of my melodies. And that's actually, there's a filter that's built into the circuit bent VCO that you can CV in order to kind of sweep through the different filter modes. As you sweep it through, it kind of does its own thing as far as what it filters. So I had that CV'd, and then as well as the dope for wasp on the other side of it. So it's kind of doubly filtered. There's the circuit bent VCO and then the wasp on the other side of it. Of course, I decided it wouldn't be a kind of a traditional Frederick Foxtrott patch without the Phonogene. So I got that kind of glitched out melody, and all I did is I fed a octave of the bass line, 2 octaves up from the bass line, into the Phonogene, and then spliced it up and swept through those as well. Of course, you probably heard the rings as well, those bell tones. For the past couple of weeks, I've been hanging out with the drum brute, the Arturia drum brute, but I decided to go back to my roots with the Dr. Rhythm 670, the good old drum machine that I've always loved. The sounds are so amazing, and that's really what's going on. But the idea is, I'll just say this conceptually, it's a very kind of happy song. I'm not happy, but kind of supposed to be kind of uplifting, but there's also kind of a somberness to it and a desire to kind of leave. And that's what the lyrics are about. And when I developed the song more fully, and you can articulate the vocals a little better, the lyrics are kind of grim, and it's about wanting to escape suburbia in a way. And in honor of that, I have Donnie Darko playing in the background. So.
It's real, like a unbearable lightness of being kind of song in that respect. Well, I think it's a good time. Let's throw it out to the audience and see if they have anything to say. Any questions?
Yeah. Hey, I got a question. The guitar was featured pretty prominently in that kind of breakdown section. It was really cool. It went through a looper. Mm-hmm. I loved it. I got 2 questions about it. Number one, did you always intend to use guitar and like build the patch around the idea that you wanted to use a guitar looper? And, or did it just kind of like you made the patch and then thought, hey, this would sound good with a guitar? And then the second part of the question is, did you make any kind of changes or adjust your patch in order to make room for the guitar so that it could really shine?
That's a great question. Yeah, and actually from the NYMS performance, I actually did a guitar on the back end as well, and that was just because I saw that my camera wasn't on the guitar the first time around, and I wanted to have some guitar. I wanted some guitar face, To your question, yeah, I think I mentioned I'm not sure too, but when I was writing the patch for the show. I really I wanted to do something that was quintessentially me. And my music has always been kind of synthesizers with guitar. That's always been kind of a bedrock. And it's been about probably the past 6 months where I've kind of really wanted to play with the synthesizer and really kind of leave the guitar, maybe other instruments, leave the key synths out of it, and really just kind of hunker down on the modules. And I got a whole other rack as well, so I figured I'd do that. But for this show, I almost wanted to be as unexploratory as possible. I wanted to just kind of show me and what I usually do. So the guitar was always going to be there, is the short answer to that question. And I really wanted to kind of have a kind of 80s guitar lick. I think we always confuse what the 80s or what nostalgia is as far as what was actually back then versus what we play. But I wanted to have that kind of feel. Like, I think there was was it Matt Mays and the El Torpedo, I think is a Toronto band that from the mid to late 2000s that had that guitar with synths and stuff like that. And I was kind of thinking about that, or maybe a more poppy version of that now might be a War on Drugs, maybe a lick or something like that.
I've been reliably informed that that's a Calgary band.
Excellent. Well, maybe it's a Canadian thing then. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I was kind of going for. And I wanted it to be kind of the centerpiece, doing a long form song for 20 minutes that's still kind of moving and not centered on one spot, especially if you have a hook. Like I have one hook. I mean, I have a lot of different melodies, but there's one obvious hook in the song. And so I wanted to kind of, have that first kind of section, then have kind of a guitar part, and then kind of have that second vocoder section, which I would loop that. And I have a really great looper. It's the Infinity Looper, and nice cat. The Infinity Looper, which of course is MIDI triggered and has a lot of different so it's always in sync and really, and it has 2 different channels, so you can come on and off with different instruments or blend them together however you want. Believe it or not, I'm controlling a lot of the sounds with my feet. As I'm playing up here, I'm controlling guitar pedals and volume pedals with my toes. So I'm barefoot. And when I can't get it, I have to bend down, and you'll see when I do that. But I don't know if I hope that answers your question. I hope that answers your question.
I too have a question.
Oh, Jamie, love seeing your face.
Thank you. My question is 2 parts. 1, where did I put my keys? And 2, you had a pretty nice sort of woodblock, like clap percussion sound happening at one point.
Oh, yeah.
Nice and soft and still hit nicely and really stuck out. But I was wondering what you did to make that sort of like stand out while not being too aggressively hitty. You know what I mean? Like
not being too cowbelly.
Well, yeah, no, I think it is a woodblock sound. It's a woodblock sample from one of the many banks of the Dr. Rhythm. On the BeatStep Pro, you can program the.
Yeah.
So that is a woodblock. It has gated reverb. My drums have gated reverb on it from coming out of that. So it kind of, it doesn't have quite the hit, but when it sits in the mix with other things, it sounds very clearly like a kind of woodblock. But one of the great things about the BeatStep Pro is it has a velocity, CV. So basically, or this is actually through MIDI, but so instead of just having, if you were just to program it in, it would just be very, it wouldn't have that kind of live feel to it. You go to the velocity and you just adjust the velocity so that it's not hitting quite as hard every time. It's not hitting the mechanical way of the same force every time.
So the velocity is, as far as the MIDI world goes, like that number, like that's another 0 to 127 number, right? Or
that's correct. It's 0 to 127, right? So you won't be able to see this, but like right now, if I go to velocity, it's like 109, 116, 89, 58.
And does that sound bank change? Does it change the actual tone based on velocity? I know that.
Yeah, right. So it's exactly as if you're hitting it like or you're playing. Yeah. Or if you're hitting it harder or softer, when humans play those instruments, they're not going to hit it the same force every time. So it's really important that, and not only what's really great about this is that when you're playing it and you're programming it, it actually records your velocity as you hit the pad. Yeah. So you can hit it harder and softer and things like that. It's not
really good. It's a quality sound. It's a quality sound pad. It really did sound good. So
yeah, I mean the Dr. Rhythm is probably one of the most unsung drum machines. It's really fantastic, especially if you don't bother using the actual pad and get another controller to use it and just use it. I have it like literally Velcroed underneath my little fatty. I set it up in the beginning. And then I forget it. And then I just control it all with my BeatStep Pro.
Yeah. Robby.
Yes.
That was dope. I loved it. People in the chat loved it.
Ah.
I don't even know. I'm rendered speechless. I'm still transported to the 1980s where I'm fighting a war against the robots. But I'm using the power of dance to fight them. That's kind of how I was feeling there.
I just held up my copy of the Thing soundtrack because I was like imagining a John Carpenter movie where that was the score to like I was like, oh my god, this is so cool. It's such a it's like a complete full song. It's like it's got ups and like that was a ride, man. That was such a cool example of what these things can do, what these little Eurorecs can do. It's awesome.
I was going to say I really appreciate the comment because one of the things I always try to do is I try to make a very like I only have 3 rows, right? 9U. So each in Eurorack each row is 3 rack units high, and I have 9U. So that's 3 rows of modules, and it's only about 100 HP wide. So that's not a huge. It's not a huge rack. In fact, I think Frederick Foxtrott has more modules, more modules, if you can believe it. And admittedly, okay, he does come up with a fuller sound, but I'd like to think I'm right up there with my limited modules. I'd like to think that I'm somewhere in the ballpark.
That's actually a great, when I just had the one rack, that was actually my thing, is I was like, how much can I do with just that one? Like I almost prided myself on only having this limited amount of modules to work with. And I ended up getting the second rack for a variety of reasons. But to go back to the movie point, I was actually watching the kind of crescendo scene where the plane is falling out of the sky and Donnie Darko, and it's like his like face, and he does the Donnie Darko face right at the crescendo of your song. I was like, I almost want to break copyright and just screw it, because I mean, who cares, right? They're not gonna if I do a clip and like stick it right in the middle.
This is such famous last words territory.
Yeah, right.
Who cares about copyright?
Well, no, I mean for YouTube, right? The YouTube will they'll demonetize, but they won't take it down. Usually. One of the things I was thinking about was and we'll get into it a little bit later about, I really respect your technical knowledge. This sounds like such a stock question, but with you particularly, I'm really interested in it, is this idea of process, right? And what is because like, I know how I write like a synth patch. I know how I do it. And then I listen to other people, and they'll often only use 1 or 2 things so different from the way I approach things, but they do get this really full sound, or it just sounds, to my ears, it sounds so amazing. So maybe I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about what is your process for, like, when do you set like rhythm first? Do you have a main melody that you find, and then you have to find accompanying things, like an accompanying bass line or a bass line you like, and then an accompanying melody? What is your process? Yeah, I'll leave it with that.
Yeah, I will say that the first thing I always think of is a mood. I try to decide what mood I want to do. And that kind of informs the entire rest of the process, because, it's I think it's really easy to just set the quantizer in minor pentatonic and randomize the notes, and everything sounds pretty good together. But that always kind of has the same vibe to it. So the first thing I do is I try to think of a mood. Do I want it to sound heroic? Do I want it to sound uplifting? Do I want it to sound pensive? Do I want it to be thoughtful and introspective? And I don't necessarily pick a fancy word, but I definitely think of a mood, and whatever the normal mood word that a person would use, that's the mood that I pick, and I go forward from there. But so that's always the same. But I will say after that, it changes wildly. Sometimes I think, okay, I'm gonna do some chords. Sometimes I think, okay, I'm gonna do a bass line first, which is actually what I did this time. I had a bass line, and it was just a simple bass line because I was using my Euclidean sequencer, which is just 5 notes, mostly evenly divided over 16 beats. sometimes I'll have a melody. Sometimes I'll just make a drum beat. So it varies wildly after I decide the mood. But in this case, I went with the bass line, and then I made sort of a plucky melody over it. And then I knew I wanted to make a cool sound. And so I wanted something to kind of sound once in a while, maybe every 4 beat measures or whatever. And actually there was kind of a cool hit at the beginning of every phrase. I don't know how else to describe it. And that if you hear it, it kind of sounds like an electric guitar. And that's the Simulacetaritas alter, not being a drum, but being a melodic voice and making a real cool, grungy, guitar-y thing.
I noticed that. Yeah, I noticed that. Well, that's actually interesting. It answered my question really well because, so for me, you said mood. I think conceptually, like I think of a concept, like I'm going to do something like building from the rubble, like complete, like different parts that are all kind of noise, and then building it up to something that makes sense. And so it's similar in that sense, that it's not necessarily about composing the notes and composing the music, but picking either a concept or, in your case, a mood around which to arrange things. But
can I ask a question about time signature and tempo to both of you guys, and about something I don't know because I've never worked with an analog synth piece of equipment before. Any synthesizing I've done is digital equipment, and really just me, screwing around, and it's not it's not too much detail going in. But are you hammered into are you kind of locked into like a common time, like a 4/4, and then you have to build a tempo around what you think you can squeeze into that time signature? Like, so in other words, like, could you like half time it, like make it, like, think conceptually like 2/2 time to get, and then make the tempo faster or slower to give yourself the room to wiggle, to get more swing or different, like Robby, you're just talking about quantizing to I don't know if you're talking about quantizing to pitch or to time, but and maybe I'm rambling now, but I'm just wondering if you are starting a new piece and you tell your synthesizer, I'm not gonna think about 120, I'm gonna think in 60. Does it give you more room to play around with because the ticks, like they all have internal clocks, right? And they're ticking 8 times 8, right? Does it give you any sort of like wiggle room to be more free flowing or?
Yeah, I absolutely know what you're saying, and I actually have the. So I'm really fortunate that I have. I love the sequencer. I have the Erica synth black sequencer, which is my main sequencer that I'm using, and MIDI typically does. I don't use MIDI at all on my synth, but MIDI typically does 24 pulses per quarter note, or 24 pulses per beat. Usually, what it means. The Erica, but a lot of Eurorack stuff is 1 pulse per note, so it just assumes one pulse equals one clock. There's some exceptions, and there's some I might be oversimplifying, but the Erica Synth Black sequencer is I love it because it's very performative, and I can do double time or half time or 3 halves time, or in all kinds of stuff. In this particular case, I didn't actually make use of it, but I've done it before, where I've changed times or sent reset signals, which is just a signal that says go back to beat 1 right now, no matter where you are, and you do that at weird times, but at regular times, like every 15 beats, and you get a weird rhythm. But I didn't actually make use of much of that in this one. I did have I had the drums going in a sort of a slow drum beat, and then a twice as fast drum beat that I occasionally changed back and forth between, but I didn't actually do much of that this time.
Is that how you deal with complex time signatures in these things? Do you do reset signals if you have to find a lowest common denominator of like a 6/8 versus do you have to find like the next divisible number and then like reset signal to make it sound like it's in a different key signature
sometimes
or time signature? Sometimes
you do have to send a reset signal every 6 beats. In the case of when I did a 6/8 stream on Earth Modular Society not too long ago, I actually set the pattern length to 48 beats, which is 8 times 6, so that's 8 measures of 6. So I had a nice pattern there, but sometimes there's gear that doesn't let you change the length or something like that, and the reset signal is a lifesaver. Then you just send it every 6 beats.
Yeah, and it's also a good way to switch the melody up as well. And you can have that reset go with like a random voltage or something like that. That once it hits a certain height of voltage, it can reset. And when I say quantizer, I've explained it before as well. But I was wondering for our audience, Robby, some folks don't know what quantization is. Can you give a quick explanation of what quantization is?
Yeah, I was talking about it in the context of pitches, in fact, but it can apply to time as well, and it's just rounding it to the next whole number, so to speak. If you quantize your clock or your time, it'll make it line up perfectly to the grid of music. It'll be an even subdivision. When I was talking about quantizing pitch, a lot of times people do it with the sense of a scale, so that no matter what note you actually tried to play, it's always going to make it one note in a given scale that maybe you selected. And I think it's really, I was saying it's really common for people to pick a minor pentatonic scale because everything magically sounds good together. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like easy mode.
No, thanks for that. Cause that was one of those things I was like, oh, I don't know what that means. No idea what they're talking about, but I'm gonna play it cool. So
we the layman would identify as auto tune, for the pitch side of things.
That's a good way to describe it. Auto tune. Technically, that's not right.
Okay, all right. Okay, so, yeah, because you're defining a scale that it fits into, as opposed to just tuning a note to the nearest actual note. Interesting. Okay, all right.
But I mean, functionally, you're right. It's the same thing. It's a difference it's a distinction without a difference.
Okay.
I believe foreseen up in Canada, my love of geography names. Geography names? That's not how anything works. Forestine had something interesting to ask / say.
I have questions and comments. I was going to say don't tempt the copyright gods because Robby is cursed. Every time we've had a copyright flag on EMS, and none of them have been legitimate. They were all on Robby. And he also got flagged for a generative patch. And Twitch completely muted the audio.
Yeah, for those that don't know, a generative patch is when you hook up randomness into your synthesizer. You set up the rules, but the synthesizer kind of plays itself. And it plays its own notes and it does its own thing. And it generates the music. I don't pick the individual notes. I just pick the pool of potential notes with something like a quantizer. What a great callback. And I created this generative patch, and I thought it was really cool. And I called it Exploring the Ice Planet because it was kind of echoey and it sounded like exploring an ice planet to me. So like it was literally generative random music. And there was a copyright claim. Somebody said it was theirs. And I'm like, that's next level. Wow.
Yeah. Like that doesn't even make any sense. And then the second thing, I was going to ask how you approach music now doing modular from before when you were a professional saxophone player.
Oh, bringing it in. Number one, I don't make a living. I don't make a living with my modular synthesizer. So there's that. It's not paying the rent. I have a lot more fun. It's a lot easier because it's hard to perform an entire piece on the saxophone. Typically, you need other people, and I kind of like the ability to customize my instrument. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah,
mind blown.
Yeah, he tell them about the music that you're on. He's on records, like real ones.
I've done some work with some people you may have heard of. The biggest name that you might know is I worked with this guy named Tim Armstrong. He's a guitar player and a singer in a band. He was in a band called Rancid, and then Operation Ivy before that. I'm a big, you cut me, I bleed reggae. I was recording some reggae tracks. I should say I was recording stuff for Tim Armstrong. The engineer was like, "Hey, you like reggae?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he said, "Okay, I have these other tracks that we need like a sax solo on the top of." So this is a great story. He said, "Okay, here, I'm going to play back this track." And it's this full rhythm track, right? We've got the drums, we've got the guitar, we've got the piano, we've got the bass. And he's like, "Okay, here you go." And I'm sitting there and he plays the I'm wearing cans, and so he plays the track back, and I have my saxophone, and I improvise a little melody over the top of it, and I'm like, my first time hearing it, and I get to the end of the track, and I say, okay, I think I got it. I'm ready to do a take, and he said, no, we got it, and I was like, what? No, I didn't. I had no idea what the song was going to do. Everything caught me by surprise. I was just making it up, and he's like, it'll be fine, and it was pretty good, and he pressed it to a 45, and it was on iTunes, and it has my name, like featured my name and
his name. Yeah.
So I was just like, okay. It was pretty cool.
One of the questions we often ask is people's background in music or how they came to synthesis. So I came from guitar. I played guitar, obviously not in any professional capacity, but this idea of coming from another instrument and then kind of taking that musical knowledge with you. It is interesting how it then kind of shapes how you play the synthesizer, as opposed to somebody who doesn't have that kind of that musical knowledge.
Yeah, having a music background makes you approach it in a certain way, and it's not necessarily a better way.
Yeah, not at all.
But there are people who have very small amount of like traditional music training, and they can still approach it at the synthesizer as like a technician type person and do some amazing stuff. And I love it. It's a great equalizer. That's nice.
It collapses the distinction between, we've created this distinction between like, engineering and music, and these are all separate things that aren't at all related. And you're like, no, it's all this kind of, they are all related, because when the synthesizer brings them together, and it's people who come from very different approaches and different backgrounds, but they all are engaging in the same creative process. But that's just all constructed. Welcome to my TED Talk.
And it's all math and physics at the end of the day anyway.
Yep.
And heart.
and electric meat juice.
Electric meat juice and bees, wasn't it? What was the bees?
That wasp filter, man. It sounds like angry bees, man.
Yeah, wasp
people
filter,
are really into that angry bee. Yeah. So I know, Frederick, you had a couple things you wanted to talk with Robby about too. You wanted to make sure we talked about before we had hit.
What is it about your uncanny ability to just absorb that the kind of technical and the specification? You're like a walking manual, it seems.
I don't know about that, but I'll take it. I don't look at any module as being unique. Rather than focus on the details of how it does what it does, I just try to focus on what it does, and that kind of helps. That kind of helps me remember that there's a lot of different filters out there, and they do different things in different ways, and sometimes they have different parameters, and sometimes they have different specializations, but they all kind of do the same thing. And just recognizing that it's a filter, it helps a lot. What does a filter fundamentally do? And that carries through for anything.
That's really great. The idea that's like you compartmentalize the function. And then, of course, there is variety in the function, but you don't get bogged down in that. If we're having a conversation and you're in the room, it's always a handy presence.
You said something really interesting. We're kind of going back and forth. I think your phrase was the fundamentally egalitarian nature of synthesis and the synthesis community. And Frederick and I both got really excited. We're like, oh, that's really interesting. And it was really because we talked about it today, and we all understood that in different ways. So what did you mean by that when you're talking about the egalitarian, how that plays into the synthesizer community?
Well, let me frame it this way. I go to a lot of reggae shows, and my favorite shows are always the ones where the band makes the audience feel like they're part of the show through singing or dancing or clapping or whatever. And it's not uncommon for people in the crowd to be musicians too, and for them to play reggae music. Well, in the modular synthesizer world, the overwhelming majority of people who listen to modular synthesizer music make modular synthesizer music. So the distinction between producer and consumer of content really breaks down. I guess you could make an argument that this sort of symmetrical, kind of incestuous nature kind of kind of limits the mainstream application, because it'll never be huge, because in order to have 1 billion listeners, you'd have to have 1 billion people making modular synthesizer music, because all the people who make it are the people who listen to it. But for those of us that aren't trying to make a living with our modular synthesizers, we get to participate in this awesome community where there's like these built-in mechanisms encouraging us to be nice, because I want people to listen to my music. I want to engage with people on this topic. So through purely selfish motivations, I'm encouraged to be altruistic. And you get caught in this positive feedback loop, and it feels really, really good.
But yeah, to add on to that, it's like, but it's not hard. It's not hard to get excited about other people's work. There's so much good stuff out there. It's not as though there's a great sacrifice in this, because you actually end up, engaging and finding music that you love. When I first heard, that the theme that you were thinking about, my first instinct was to talk, is synthesizers are so known for the cost of a barrier to entry to get into synthesis. And of course, I would say that synthesizers are becoming less expensive, and you can actually, for what some kid pays for a PV amp and a bass or a guitar and lessons, you can find a pretty decent synthesizer to get yourself really beginning with it. So that's where I took that, and I almost took your declaration that synthesis is kind of more egalitarian practice. I took it almost as like I took it as a provocation. And you can speak to this more. But just the community itself and the participation is what's the egalitarian part about it. As an example, I went to, I played the NYMS show on Thursday. And one of the players in that show, I've been a fan of for a long time. Before I ever got into streaming or things like that, I have the person's IIITAIII, I have the vinyl. I've been like a really big fan. And then I found out that the show I'm playing, I'm like on the same, card as him. And it was, it really just kind of shows that community it's accessible, and it's about participation, and it's, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but
that's exactly what I'm talking about when I say that the division between the superstars producing the content and the lowly ants consuming the content. It's not that wide, and you can talk to people about it. And I've never felt I'm drawn to communities like that, and I don't enjoy using most social network services because they're not that. There's people who are verified and have a check mark next to their name and have 1 trillion followers, and then there's the people who have 12 of their friends that follow them, and it's not an even thing. It's not a nice thing.
Modular is also one of the only places where the people who make the instruments are in the community too. Like, that's super cool. Like, yeah, my first NYMS show was right before someone who made a module that was in my rack, and I was just like freaking out about it.
Great.
Can I just mention that what you're talking about is the same thing that happens in the open source software world? It's like identical. There's like lots of, and it can be shitty too sometimes, but there's lots of camaraderie and discussion, and people share their code openly. And
when you talked about that too, what it made me think of is what I've been thinking about a lot. Last weekend was the Modular World streamathon for 36 hours, and I've been watching a bunch. I watched it then, and I watched a bunch on YouTube, kind of doing stuff, and I took it a whole different way, talking about egalitarianism, because I was really struck by watching that all those artists and how many artists were. This is a range of genders, a range of like different communities of color were represented. Different ages of people. Ageism is kind of the ism that we don't talk a lot about, but there's a lot of performers who were young performers, also older performers, and everything in between. And I thought that was really, because there's a space, and because of the nature of the instrument, or because of the nature of the community, as it develops, there's space for all sorts of different kinds of people to participate in it. That's how I took it. And so it was really interesting listening to you guys talk about your take on that statement. It was a good topic. I was really taken with it. Got us all worked up. So now we're at the part of the evening where we plug stuff. Robby, What do you got go? Oh
Well,
my God!
Schmooster
It's
said
happening.
he wanted to
It's
say
happening.
something earlier. He said it an hour ago. But no one saw
I
him.
thought I'd keep myself
Me,
muted
except me.
just while there's things happening. I thought I'd keep quiet. I've been playing with the Pocket Operator, which is great fun.
I thought you were building a time cube.
Oh, yeah, no.
That does look like a time cube.
The 12-sided time cube.
Well,
Wait, is it a magic trick or?
No, I've got one of these things too.
there we are. I don't know. I'm not well practiced at that.
Oh,
Saving me because I don't have a lot to plug. I'm really bad. A lot of people are always like releasing albums and EPs all the time, which to me it seems a little weird. But yeah, I don't have anything to plug. I'm gonna. You can find me on Instagram at Robby is dope, and I'm gonna be updating my SoundCloud and maybe putting sounds on there, but mostly I'm on Earth Modular Society.
yeah,
That's
you're on
where to
Earth
find my
Modular
stuff.
Society a lot, right? Like on Sundays, and so that's a good place for people who want to hear more of your music. That's what they should look, the Earth Modular Society, and then the YouTube, kind of the archive there.
Yep, look at the live stream. It's on 24/7, although sometimes it is hold music, but it's still okay.
Frederick, you got anything to plug?
I have nothing to plug. I would definitely say to go back and check out the entire range of the NYMS show for last Thursday. It's on their Twitch. You can look it up. I'll put it in the description as well. And I wanted to say thank you for everyone who came in, obviously for the audience. It was so great to see familiar faces. It's been a couple weeks off and I've had a lot going on. And this Robby was just such an awesome kind of coming back into the process of putting the show together. Thank you so much. And you're really, really an inspiration. And thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
And Forrestine actually has something to plug.
Yes. On EMS, we're doing a stream train for International Drone Day, which is May 29th. And we're theming it on the 17-year cicada. So we have 17 performers. And it should be fun.
Yeah, well, that is gonna be it for us, I think, this week. Huge thanks to everyone who showed up in the audience. We had a really great discussion this week. Thank you to everyone watching on the internets. Thank you for inviting us into your house with tubes. Thank you for Frederick for all the amazing music. And thanks for Robby for coming and hanging out with us and playing us some music. And he's going to have an outro too. Robby gave us an outro we're going to listen to, and I'm really looking forward to that one. And next week we have an amazing guest, Piotr Garbachonek. He's an incredibly talented musician. If you haven't checked him out, he's on Instagram too, or you can just come in here next week and listen to him play. It's going to be great. We're going to talk. We're going to listen to some music. That is it for us tonight. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Fuck it, we'll do it live. We'll do it live. I don't give a fuck.